Have you found yourself feeling extra nostalgic these days? I know I sure have. So, I dusted off a 1960s cookbook that's been hiding on my shelf. What I found inside will absolutely shock you and instantly transport you back to the unforgettable, quirky world of the 60s. Have you ever tried putting cake around ice cream? Well, the 60s did, and they did so with flair. Arctic roll was a thing back then, and for those out of the loop, it's basically vanilla ice cream coddled in sponge cake and bathed in oh-so-scandalously appealing strawberry jam. This recipe is one I stumbled upon in an old American cookbook, and because of its quirkiness and goofiness, it just caught my attention. The Arctic roll became the dessert that everyone brought because it was simple, colorful, and tasty. Cutting through it, you get that cold, creamy core, and again, it feels like witchcraft on a platter. It is a touch of brilliance to combine cake and ice cream into one delicious bite, a perfect symbol of the psychedelic colors and space-age designs of the 60s. Arctic roll is easy. So easy, in fact, that it's positively nostalgic. A snapshot of a bygone era of kitchens that perished with the avocado green desktops. But if you are ready to start revolutionizing and bring back the 60s, then start here. One taste, and you'll think yourself into a groovy dinner party with jello salads and fondue sizzling nearby. It's cake and ice cream, the simplest of simple, but in this throwback roll, they are undeniably cool. Could there be anything that denotes a 60s party more than a bowl of clam dip on a toasted Ritz cracker? Yes, clam dip was the appetizer that was transformed into the symbol of any middle-class American dinner party of the mid-century. Amusingly, combining clams with cream cheese and other ingredients made me pause, as it was quite unexpected, but I had to try it. Well, the recipe that I came across used chopped clams, cream cheese, lemon juice, Worcestershire, and garlic powder. I thought it sounded like too much of a cliché and couldn't be all that interesting, or so I thought. Once I tasted it, I got it. Clam dip is smooth, tangy, and oddly satisfying. This is the sort of snack that leaves you wondering why in the world people used to eat things like this in the past. This dip was popular at most 60s parties, giving some sort of beachy vibe all across the country. And if you're thinking, shellfish and cream cheese, you are part of the crowd as well. It's a risky proposition, but it works, I promise. Plus, it gives a sense of a lot of nostalgia. It takes me back to a living room surrounded by shag, a lava lamp in the corner, and having the appropriate clam dip while holding a cocktail. Hearing the words bananas, butter, rum, and flames, what could possibly go wrong? Bananas Foster was invented in New Orleans, but quickly gained popularity in American homes, especially in the 1960s. From the first moment I looked at this recipe in my grandma's old cookbooks, I knew I had to at least try it because, as you can imagine, fire plays a certain character in this. This recipe involves frying bananas with butter and brown sugar, then you just turn on the heat when the rum is added here. The flames that result from flambeing bananas are just eye-catching and very theatrical. Your guest will surely be impressed, trust me. Preparing it was like staging a show in the kitchen, and trust me, it was as delicious as it seemed. The sweet, buttery sauce mixed with the bananas and a hint of rum is pure decadence. Bananas Foster is not just a dessert, it's proof that eating can sometimes be a performance. It was the glamour approach to a basic item. A banana. The next time you want a bit of sparkle in food, then Bananas Foster should be your go-to. It's a swingin' 60s island paradise minus the plane ride. While making pâté, I realized it might not be the first food I associate with the 60s. However, back then, pâté was the height of chic. I got this particular recipe from a quite dated cookbook, and honestly, making this dish was not my first choice. But I felt like going all in, blending chicken livers with butter, onions, garlic, and a splash of brandy. The result? A rich spread that feels even more special than I thought it could be. Chicken liver pâté is the type of thing that, in the 60s, you pulled out to dazzle your guests. The perfect pièce de résistance that proclaimed you the culinary wizard you were. One taste, and I understood. It was creamy, slightly earthy, and rich. with a cracker and garnish on the side, I could almost imagine myself hosting a retro 70s dinner party. Pâté is not something you see often these days, but it has that specific appeal that never goes out of style. In those early years, having a plate of pâté was enough to prove that you are cultured. You have class, perhaps. Take a chance, and you might channel your inner Candice Bergen, complete with a sherry glass or two, as a swanky 60s socialite. If you're only familiar with flambéed bananas from the 60s, you should also know about Cherry's Jubilee. Cherries, cute and round, booze-covered topping, and fire. I don't see anything bad here. As soon as I read through this recipe in my old cookbook, I realized that I had to give it a try. You warm cherries in a butter sauce before adding brandy to it and lighting it up. As an added bonus, you get to set your kitchen on fire. Sitting and watching those flames char over the cherries was an experience bookmarked right next to watching fireworks. Once you extinguish the fire, you are left with a slightly sweet, fruity sauce that's good over vanilla ice cream. People often chose Cherry's Jubilee because it was both tasty and fancy, bringing glamour to any dinner party. If you can take such basic elements and add a little soul to it, then it truly feels like there's magic in the world. Sure, it's a jaw-dropping creation even now and can give that mid-century look right here and now. Give it a whirl, and your house party will feel like a 1960s dining room with vintage decor and a sense of occasion. It's not the typical appetizer you would ever find. It's bacon-wrapped, portioned, and has a 60s twist to it. When I saw this recipe, I thought that it was high time to give it a try. Picture this: a dish consisting of marinated chicken livers and freshly deveined water chestnuts encased in thin bacon slices and then pan-broiled to golden bristle. Well, I can hear you racking your brain right now. Chicken liver? I mean, honestly, I question this too, but for some reason, this combination is sort of delicious. The liver contributes a creamy richness, the water chestnut adds a nice crunch to the recipe, and the bacon, oh, the bacon? Oh well, that is self-explanatory. Rumaki was first popular back in the day at tiki parties, especially when accompanied by Mai Tais and a healthy dose of camp. This appetizer has an exotic air, and that's perfect because the 60s party scene wanted just that. It is a little salty, a little like mesquite, and very tasty, the cool cousin of bacon-wrapped anything. It's also an opener to a conversation. Prepare rumaki for your next themed gathering. It will surely spark curiosity among your guests. This might be one of the most memorable flavors I've tasted. One bite, and you're sure to be caught in its allure. It is one of the all-time old favorites that should make a comeback, especially during a themed party or as a fun and daring test to try out an old flavor. A cake that has a center that melts with chocolate. Sign me up! The tunnel of fudge cake was a fad in the 60s, and after preparing it myself, I fully understand why it caused all the fuss. This is not a bundt cake of normal variety. It comes with a center that is created while baking and can be described simply as a gush of chocolate with each slice. The recipe gained popularity in 1966 after clinching the Pillsbury Bake Off title, and it, the cake, was so popular that it created demand for bundt pans all over the country. When I finally sliced it, that lovely chocolate fill was a treat, warm, sticky, and awfully sinful. And the flavor? Dark nougat chocolate with a little addition of walnut for crust. This cake might as well be the name of the 1960s, overblown excess and ostentatious indulgence. This cake feels like a step back into the 70s, with its rich colors and nostalgic appeal. It's a timeless recipe, perfect for bringing out an old-school dessert or a cake that would elicit the wow factor. This is one dessert that deserves all the hype it receives all over the world. Lobster on a budget? Say less. The mock lobster was a thing back in the 60s. When I came across this recipe, I just couldn't let it go. Instead of shelling out for lobster, home cooks would use white fish, usually haddock, boil it with spices and serve it drenched in butter and lemon. It's seafood sorcery. You take a normal fish and make it upmarket. Was it real lobster? Not quite, but that must have been how Homer Simpson felt in his dreams after almost cheating on Marge. Sorry, spoilers alert! The mock lobster was such a profitable idea back then because many people, including entire families, could seem to afford to eat a better class meal without having to pay the excessive price. It was easy to make and rather tasty. The butter and lemon really make it creamy and almost decadent. I actually thought it was pretty clever. Mock lobster has a sort of quirky, retro appeal, and although it won't convince a seafood snob, it's kind of fun to play at. Mock lobster epitomizes creativity, and let's face it, it is not half bad for a fake dish thought out because of attempts at frugality, and it's the culinary equivalent of culture jamming. The first thing that struck me was the name of the recipe, which would be porcupine meatballs. I just had to know what a meatball recipe was like. Lo and behold, the secret is in the rice. While these meatballs are cooking, the expansion of the rice makes peaks with the appearance of porcupine quills. I decided to try it. Therefore, I bought them, and they did not let me down. Made out of ground beef, rice, and spices, they are cooked in tomato sauce until the rice is soft and swollen. Porcupine meatballs were originally appropriate for large, low-priced servings, ideal for a family in the 60s. Each meatball is flavorful and moist, with a texture that may remind you of childhood meals. They're simple but hearty, the kind of dish that makes you feel like you're eating a slice of history. Making them felt like bringing a little homey retro feel into my kitchen. Every time, a shiver ran up my spine, and I could almost see the formica table and the shag carpet of middle-class homes in mid-century America. It's a fun recipe to make, and, for those on the receiving end, a fun food to munch on, and thus a good recipe to bring back into fashion for anyone who loves retro food. The sidecar doesn't have to be simply a beverage. It is a cocktail with a sense of occasion. But as far as popular drinks go, this concoction of brandy, orange-flavored liqueur, and lemon juice was the tipple of the sophisticated set in the swinging 60s. I couldn't help myself and made one of my own, and I will tell you this cocktail is as good as they say. I get to taste the sweetness coming out of the honey with the sour taste of the lime juice as well. Therefore, it is powerfully rich, creamy, sharp, and pleasant to the taste buds. The sidecar was popular because it was simple to prepare, but then still had the glamour associated with cocktails because when served in sugar-rimmed glass with a twist of lemon, it was so classy. The taste of it gives a drinker the impression that they are in a smoky jazz bar or a retro lounge. It's stylish and a wee bit sultry. It is easy to make one at home, but every time one takes a sip, they feel like they are tasting something special that comes with cocktail events. This drink is still here today because, well, it is not just a drink. In fact, it is a part of cocktail history, and as stylish and delicious as it was back then. Who knew you could turn cheese and flour into an addictive snack that would make a whole room of guests swoon? Cheese straws were part of nearly every 60s party, and once I attempted to make this recipe, I understood why. These crispy, cheesy sticks were like homemade snacks, but improved. Sharp cheddar cheese, a pinch of cayenne pepper, and the buttery, flaky texture that might just actually melt in your mouth. I have to say I was not entirely sure how they'd turn out, but these cheese straws are absolutely delicious and quite simple to prepare. Simple as it may seem, this combination delivers more flavor than you'd expect. Cheese straws have that old-world feel to them too, like a party treat for a cocktails and canapés event. It's for this reason that they have remained popular for such a long time. They are easy to prepare and are more sophisticated than some basic party snacks. These I could easily see fitting right in at a party today, mainly as these are sort of the classic band snack while having cocktails. Try these if you fancy a vintage snack that would surely win the spotlight, and be prepared for them to disappear fast. The cheese ball, the sensation of the 50s and the crown spotlight of all 1960s cheese fests. Finally, one day I was lucky enough to stumble on this recipe, and I knew it would be mine. I do like being able to gather up a big load of cheese and then roll it all up in nuts, herbs, or whatever you like the taste of. The best part is that everyone loves it. Each guest can spread cheese and cream on a cracker for the perfect bite. Making one of these feels like channeling old-school Hollywood glamour, the closest most of us will ever get. This cheese ball is easy to make, versatile, and has a 70s wow factor. It is a talking point and a snack all rolled into one. Every good cheese ball has that extra bite of sharpness that makes them tempting and easily addictive. Well, it might be a little old school, but that is probably why this appetizer has remained popular. Need a sure gimmick for your next party? Well, whip up a cheese ball. It'll be the centerpiece that no one can stop eating. This really isn't your classic pig in a blanket, if you know what I mean. Snakes in a blanket are simply wrapped sausage dishes taken to a whole new level. Oh, I laughed when I saw this in a 60s cookbook. How horror movie like this recipe sounded like. However, what I initially thought of as a playful version of pigs in a blanket I rather enjoyed. In this recipe, you roll some sausage links with the crescent roll dough and then ensure that you give the rolls a little form so that they look like snakes or rolls you would normally get. Baked until golden and crispy, they're as tasty as they are playful. This is why I enjoy how food in the 60s was a little more theatrical. These snakes would also fit great at a 60s themed party, or indeed any other party. They're great for kids and adults alike and bring a little whimsical touch to the table. For those who want to go the extra mile, serve these with a side of what the Marlboro Man calls swamp mustard and venom sauce on the side, and the crowd will be grinning while munching on the treats. Occasionally, food can just be frivolous, and that is exactly what snakes in a blanket are. The Brandy Alexander is rich, creamy, and slightly naughty, but oh so classic. A cocktail that rose to fame in the 60s. I just had to try it, especially when any drink that was considered good enough for the Rat Pack automatically got my attention. The Brandy Alexander is a brandy-based cocktail containing creme de cacao and cream, topped with nutmeg, and served in a chilled glass. There is an element of luxury akin to a decadent indulgence, but it's not nearly as cloying as it sounds. Making one of these feels like channeling old-school Hollywood glamour is probably the closest most of us will ever get. The Brandy Alexander, a rather sweet cocktail, was especially popular as an after-dinner drink. The synergy of brandy and chocolate is beyond words. The drink has a modern feel, yet each sip shows its timeless appeal. Fans of historical cocktails would love this drink, as it gives you that 90s vibe. Flavored spirits and dessert drinks were all the rage. Give it a go at home. Not only are they full of the 60s kitsch, they're laugh-out-loud funny and seriously glamorous drinks too. Despite its name, German chocolate cake originated in America and took the world by storm in the 1960s. When I came across this recipe, I couldn't wait to make it because, this cake is just sinfully delicious. The cake layers are moist and delicious, but the best part is the frosting, a mix of caramel, coconut, and pecans that complements the sweetness of the cake and adds a nutty flavor. The flour base of the recipe is named after German's sweet chocolate, which is an American chocolate created by a chocolatier named Samuel German. This cake was a highlight of birthday celebrations, vacations, and other special events, and as you enjoy it now, you'll understand why. Every chunk you take is something that is sticky, full of chocolate, and has a crunch from the nuts. It's like a celebration in cake form, and making it feels like an accomplishment. There's just something special about it, As you can tell from the recipe, German chocolate cake is not difficult to make, but it takes a fair amount of time. It's a retro classic that stands the test of time, combining all the best things about dessert into one glorious slice. It may be a simple cake, but if you're feeling like cooking and are in for a challenge and a touch of nostalgia, this is the cake for you. To be honest, the first time I tried making smoked salmon mousse, I was tensed. It just sounds like something you can only dream of cooking in your kitchen. But let me tell you this, there is nothing as complicated with this dish as it sounds, and it's divine in taste. Picture this, smoked salmon mixed with cream cheese, some lemon juice, and shredded dill until it's creamy enough for spreading. Spread it on a cracker, and suddenly it's like bringing happy hour to the 1960s cocktail hour party. The funny thing is, this mousse feels so luxurious, it's practically a bagel spread on steroids. The 60s were all about taking some simple ingredients and making a fancy dish out of them, which is what smoked salmon mousse does. It is salty with a strong hint of smoke, and it is incredibly tasty without being too fatty. In addition, it's one of those recipes that makes you feel like a real chef, a woman who has trained all her life to prepare exquisite snacks, even if all you did was throw a few items in a blender. Each time I prepare it, people rave about it as if I've served them a once-in-a-lifetime meal. It's thick, it's shiny, and it's definitely going to leave a lasting impression. Mixing the Sazerac is truly like getting a brief taste of New Orleans, and I'm all for it. But as we know, it is not just any cocktail, but possibly the oldest known American cocktail from the 1800s. In the first one that I prepared, I could almost hear the jazz band in the background. The glass is first rinsed with absinthe, or any anise-flavored liquor, followed by rye whiskey, sugar, and bitters. They're daring, powerful, and even rude at times, but that's what's amazing about them. One sip takes you straight to a jazzy bar, even if you're just at home in your kitchen. Don't be tempted to use a shaker or add ice. An elegant Sazerac is not prepared that way. A twist of lemon peel is only served as a garnish. However, it adds that special freshness to complement the dense whiskey. The Sazerac is a legend. It's a cocktail that brings the taste of New Orleans to your glass and a boost of assertiveness in one. Each time I make one, I get the history of the cocktail and bring it into reality in some way. Scalloped potatoes were most definitely what the 60s considered comfort food, and truthfully, they still are today. Why boiled potatoes are so spectacularly coated with thin layers of cream, butter, and cheese, one may never know. The first time I made them, I couldn't believe something so simple could be so rich. But they are. The cream, cheese, and bread become richer, gooier, and toastier, and the top turns into a sweet, amateur-caught toffee color when baked. It's like potato heaven. For giggles, I pulled them out of the oven, and something within me told me that I had stumbled onto the key to happiness inside a casserole. Every time I serve them, people go wild because it's impossible to resist a plate full of creamy, cheesy potatoes. Scalloped potatoes may not be the trendiest side dish today, but I believe they always have been and always will be delicious. Easier said than done. There is no way you can munch on these and not feel like you have been transported back to the 1960s family dinner. Stuffed cherry tomatoes could be one of the prettiest, most miniature throwback appetizers you can prepare. The first time I tasted them, I was shocked by the quality of the food inside the small trappings. You hollow out each cherry tomato and fill it with any stuffing, such as herbed cream cheese or crab salad, and if you can, include a small parsley sprig. Another one that just seems so logical, yet makes the game all the more enjoyable to play when done. Each one you pop in your mouth bursts with creamy, tangy goodness inside a sweet, juicy tomato. I use them for parties because people just keep putting it in their mouths, and in a short while you have a group of happy tomato-munching guests. Also, they resemble little jewels placed on a plate, which makes them a favorite on any appetizer table. Stuffed cherry tomatoes don't sound like gourmet dining, but every time I prepare them, people come begging for more. They are enjoyable, they are stylish, and they are exactly what the world has been missing: finger foods. Just as much making lime jello salad with cottage cheese is like going back in time. It's bright green, jiggly, and probably one of the most peculiar dishes of the 1960s, if not the strongest. When I made it the first time, I just cracked up laughing at how wild it appeared, and then, boom, I found it quite fun. If you have never tried lime jello with cottage cheese, you may think that this is quite an odd pairing, but there is something so delicious about the sharpness of the cottage cheese mixed with the sweeter, more citrusy lime. For some crunch, you stir in crushed pineapple and walnuts, and that's when you realize how strange and yet so delicious an idea it is to have this salad. This is a dish that leaves its consumers' eyes popping out of their heads when placed on the table, but once people get a taste of it, they can't do well without it. Well, I'm definitely developing quite a liking for lime jello salad now. It's unusual, it's vibrant, and it is very obviously 60s if I have ever seen anything 60s in my life. Each time I prepare it, I swear that I am serving a piece of 1950s bargain kitchen with all that quivering included. I can never resist cheese puffs. They are what some people call death by cheese puffs. They're very tempting. The first time I prepared them, I never thought they'd be eaten as fast as they were. These are not the neon orange, crunchy from the bag snacks. These are light, cheesy, and baked relatively easily, bites that you have in your home. Think of small balls of dough that are fried on the outside and soft on the inside with melted cheese. In a way, it is as if you were eating savory pastry and a warm embrace all at once. The best part? You can add all sorts of cheese: cheddar, Gruyere, Parmesan, or really whatever, depending on your preference. They swell really nicely in the oven, and they also give out the most delightful aroma. The cheese puffs were a staple for those cocktail parties in the 60s, and I totally get why that was. First, they're small and portable. Second, they are simple to prepare. And third, people love them. Each time I serve them, people immediately start grabbing one after another. With just a few things, you can pull off something so great. So, if you are willing to turn your guests into blushing fools, get the cheese out and start baking. Cheese puffs are clean, classic, and undeniably retro. Lipton onion soup dip is an old-school snack, and I approve of it. Sour cream and a packet of Lipton's onion soup mix are the only two things needed to create this delicious dip. At any family gathering, my mother would prepare it, and that dish was always gone within seconds. Just how the dried onions and spices changed the sour cream to a creamy, delicious delight is beyond comprehension. It had to be thick and rich. It had that perfect oniony taste that is now almost craving-worthy. Serve it with some traditional ruffled potato chips, and you are all set for a snack lover. Who would have thought such a simple dish would be a hit? Every time I make this, I feel like it is taking me back home, and my God, every single person I have served this to, including the people who hate onion dip but want to be all like, "Oh, I don't actually like that," they always end up loving it. It is a little taste of the 1960s for those who never got enough of that. Homemade hued dips that do not take precious time in the kitchen and that never fail to impress are the best. No, seriously, this one is a must-try, and I don't say that lightly. The wedge salad is only like the prima donna of salads, large, dramatic, and a relic of a time long, long gone. When I made it the first time, I was even skeptical to make it in the first place. It's just a scoop of iceberg lettuce with loads of additions. But then I took a bite. The crispiness of the lettuce, the thickness of the blue cheese dressing, the crispiness of the bacon, and at last, the crispiness of the chives. What I did can be described in the simplest of methods, but at the same time, it was one of the most gratifying activities I've done. The wedge salad became very popular in the 60s, and it's not hard to see why. It is all about the garnish. People used to think iceberg lettuce was the fanciest base for a salad, and honestly, there's something special about it. This salad is not for the shy. It is a loud shout-out to the kitchen. Each time I prepare it, the guests are amazed by how unassuming but tasty this dish is. It's practically an edible sculpture on the plate. So if you want to make your table look a little old school, grab a head of iceberg, chop it up, and then go nuts with the toppings. The wedge salad is a prime example of the fact that sometimes less is more. Marinated cucumber salad isn't fancy, but it is an unsung hero from the 60s. When I first attempted it, I did not anticipate anything special from cucumbers, vinegar, and just a couple of spices. But let me tell you folks, this salad is not only light but flavorsome as well. The key is allowing those thin cucumber slices to absorb that tangy, slightly sweet marinade for a couple of hours. It's amazing how the cucumbers transform, getting almost pickled while staying crisp. In the preparation, I add in some thinly sliced onions to act as a little hotspot, and occasionally a scattering of fresh dill. And every time I serve it for friends and family, they are stunned at how Moorish it is. This is a refreshing, crisp sauce that is best eaten with heartier dishes. It's one of those recipes that reminds me of a family picnic and barbecue in summer, or any other summer event in short. While cucumber marinated salad is not very complicated, it goes perfectly for the retro side dish as it is quite powerful. So if you are hunting for a tasty and easy salad recipe, here it is, the easiest ever, marinated cucumber salad. It is truly the smallest glimpse of the 60s, and you can never go wrong with that. Parmo is somewhat of an underground establishment that gets me giddy with delight every time, a major comfort food obsessive. Coming from England but popularized in the 1960s, Parmo is simply fried breaded chicken served with a bechamel sauce and cheese and baked till melted and brown. Do you ever wonder what would happen if chicken parm suddenly decided to go on a crazed cheesy escapade? The first occasion that I prepared it, I was hugely surprised at how rich it was. The chicken remains tender within, the bechamel sauce is essentially flawless and creamy, although not overly thick, and the cheese, well, you can never go wrong with more cheese, right? Parmo is one of those dishes that, while not necessarily exotic, can more than adequately fill the appetite in the winter and on cold days. Compliments to whoever devised this route, since every time I serve it, people just ask for more. It is gooey, it is crisp, it is creamy, and it is everything good that a meal ought to be. I particularly urge you to cook this for your next dish if you are ready for a retro recipe that is deliciously silly and delightfully cheesy all at once. I assure you there is a reason behind consuming it. Every cheesy bite is delightful. So the next on our list is some Miracle Whip, and this magic spread was the key to making all your hunger vanish away in a gust of wind all the way back in 1969. Seriously, breakfast wasn't complete without this, and it became a staple of literally anything that involved mayo at all. It was a miracle-like spread that even used salads, and the reason it got so popular is because every mayo kind of tastes the same. You always have that strange tanginess with the sourness, but this one was a sweet mayo, and baby boomers grew up with it in their potato salads, their cold pasta, their sandwiches, and their pizza. It was definitely one of the most genre-defining products Kraft Heinz ever came out with, and people that were there for its time in the sun will remember that nothing really compares to the feeling of a Miracle Whip loaded mayo, bacon, lettuce, tomato sandwich. Speaking of Southern traditions, this next one was a staple too. Yeah, let's turn our attention to pork jowl, an often overlooked cut of meat that's been a staple in Southern barbecue for years. The pork jowl was basically the cheek of the pig, and while it might not sound glamorous, it was packed with flavor and had a unique texture that barbecue lovers appreciated. It's fattier than bacon, but with a more intense flavor. Smoked or barbecued pork jowl was typically seasoned with a blend of spices and then cooked slowly to develop its rich, smoky flavor. Pork jowl might not be the most mainstream barbecue item these days, but it's a delicious example of how barbecue traditions make the most of every part of the pig. The 70s were preceded by one historically bad string of events, like the war period and the economic recession. Both of those things gave birth to a new kind of cooking style known as mock food, and mock food would often have desserts that were no-bake desserts. They didn't need to be baked, or they didn't require your typical ingredients. Grasshopper pie was a bit of a hybrid, because it was made with crème de cacao, whipped cream, and crème de menthe, which are definitely not your typical ingredients, but aren't really easily accessible either, and it did not need to be baked. It was a pie that treaded new flavors entirely. You wouldn't hear people use the words minty and refreshing for a pie, right? You just haven't had a grasshopper one, and in the 70s, this really got around. In the 1970s, it was one of the frontliners as far as frozen desserts were considered, and it worked even in warmer months too. The mint flavoring came from the crème de menthe, which gave it its iconic green hue too. One thing you can see in this dish is that it shows how the 70s had a preference for cooking with some style and flair. They didn't just want their dishes to taste good back then, they wanted it to look good too. Those two can stand on their own as main dishes, but what do we have for boomer side dishes? Let's talk about meat that's still enjoyed in some parts of the country, but definitely not as much as it used to be. Goat barbecue. Goat barbecue was known for its gamey flavor and tender texture, making it a favorite among those who enjoyed a bit of variety in their barbecue menu. Goat barbecue was typically marinated with a blend of spices and herbs before being slow cooked or grilled. So this one falling out of flavor is a big loss for barbecue fans because hear me out. Goat meat is lean, flavorful, and packed with protein. It's still a popular choice in many cultures for a reason. But as tastes changed, so did the demand for goats. It's a shame, really. Young's also hit culinary and financial gold when they came up with Findus crispy pancakes, perhaps one of their most successful product lines yet. These were replaced with Chef's classic and original Pancake Co. But so many people outright rejected that. Talk about product loyalty, huh? Even today, there is quite an active and loud community on the internet advocating daily with every bit of their bandwidth to bring this back. We get it too, since these were such a cheap and affordable way to have some absolutely fluffy and delicious pancakes. Early in the morning or late at night, none of that mattered when there was no batter to deal with and only joy to have. It is quite sad that the best of things often get taken away from us, that too around their peak years. One blessed thing about the hand of a passionate grandparent cooking for their favorite family members is that they always knew how to get the best out of the bland and boring. Things like apples were suddenly key players in cultural delicacies like apple cider vinegar pie, when before, parents would struggle to get their kids to even maintain eye contact with an apple for more than 10 seconds. Granted, these were sautéed apples with vinegar, vanilla, cinnamon, and a lot of time in the oven, but they were still irresistible. A good cinnamon or maple syrup was the perfect sauce to round this pie off and bring its full potential as an acidic but sweet slice of heaven out. Apple cider vinegar has been a popular hit in America for many decades now, and it does not look like the grandparents of today intend to change that. Look anybody in the eye and ask them their top 5 breakfast foods of all time that they can actually imagine buying every day because of the price, and watch as entire masses of people answer with peanut butter spread. Well, Frugal did not need to ask that to know there was a serious need for a flavored peanut spread that brought something else to the table, something no other spread was offering. It launched its line of Frugal spreads with several flavors such as chocolate and cinnamon, and its versatility was probably why so many age groups and people jammed with it, as you could always find a tub of Frugals in the fridge back in the 70s. They got discontinued sometime into the 80s, but these were a legendary spread that people miss out on today. An even healthier and nicer breakfast than some good old jam can be classic oatmeal, which cuts your fat, builds muscle, tastes great if you know what you are doing, and is easy enough to make. Quaker Instant Oatmeal Sea Adventures line especially understood why something like oatmeal has been consumed as breakfast all over the world for literally centuries now, and capitalized on the simple but timeless dish. They came out with several different versions like Quaker Berry Blue Sea Adventures, and one of the most popular aspects was the blocks of sugar eggs you could find inside the oatmeal, which added both a sensory surprise and one for your taste buds. Quaker oats are already a household name still, but this particular line of oatmeal? They outdid themselves by a mile. Speaking of the chefs of today, they have some pretty interesting differences when it comes to the modern take on a mincemeat pie. These days you see dried fruits and even rum and brandy being used in the dish along with various spices. No sign of meat anywhere, despite it literally being in the name. In the past, mutton or ground beef and raisins, nuts, pecans, seasonal dry fruits like these were all you needed to make an exceptionally lovely mincemeat pie. This pie has always been typically served at Christmas, but it took off so well in the South that many families would just have it as a weekly dinner too. Do you have any memories of a mincemeat pie from your childhood days? What kind of differences can you note between the pies of then and now? We sure see a lot of differences. Po' boy sandwich was a New Orleans specialty that spread across the entire nation throughout the 1970s. And that was because if you wanted to surpass your expectations for what a sandwich could do, you would get this one. Seriously, it was all the rage. This was basically the Subway footlong of the 90s, and for some pretty good reasons. The magic in this sandwich lies in that irreplaceable filling. It has the versatility to appeal to so many different kinds of tastes. Kids tend to favor your typical roast beef, chicken, turkey breast fillings, stuff like that. Some middle-aged people have more sophisticated tastes. They like going for fried shrimp or oysters. Usually, sandwiches pick a lane and stay in it, but the po' boy sandwich tried it all. It was a big part of the culture in Louisiana, and it was really popular in many restaurants as this recognizable piece of street food culture. Let's not stop there. All right, let's talk about something a little more dignified. venison. Now, we're not talking about Bambi here, people. We're talking about grown-up deer meat. In hunting communities, barbecued venison was once a prized delicacy. Imagine the satisfaction of bagging a deer, bringing it home, and then turning it into a smoky masterpiece. It was not just a meal. Barbecued venison offered an experience. Venison's unique taste made it a standout choice for barbecue lovers looking to break away from the usual fare. It was typically marinated in a mixture of spices and herbs to complement its natural flavor. The best part? It is lean and packed with protein. Fitness freaks would have loved it if it was on the menu still. Calls for a comeback, don't you think? Now, I know my audience, and I know we've all grown up on 50 different flavors of cheese, from the finest imported wheels to the best local brands, but which of you really remembers Limburger cheese? It definitely was something that only a boomer would remember, and its glory days were in the 70s when European immigrants brought it over in bulk, and it started making a name for itself. It wasn't at the front lines making names and stealing pages in cookbooks, but it was on top of every cheese platter, smothered between every sandwich, and served as a topping on many other dishes regularly. Limburger sounds German, right? You'd be right, because it does have German origins. In fact, it also has German ties, as it was heavily marketed at communities with German-American populations, which were really common in the Midwest in that era. All right, I know these are all dishes that you can make at home and even make a whole day out of, but sometimes all you want is to pop open the garage, take your wife out for a night on the town, and have some comfort food. How did people do that in the 1970s? Here's a dish that might surprise you: barbecued pork kidney. This unusual barbecue item was once a favorite among adventurous eaters who weren't afraid to explore every part of the pig. Pork kidneys, with their distinct flavor and texture, were often marinated and grilled to create a unique barbecue experience. Barbecuing pork kidney requires careful preparation and seasoning to balance its strong flavor. Pork kidney is a highly underrated cut of meat, but it is definitely an acquired taste. It used to be more common at barbecue gatherings, but it's become a rarity. It's still popular in some parts of the world. It's a popular dish in some Latin American cuisines, particularly in Argentina and Brazil, known as riñones a la parrilla. In Argentina, this dish is a nod to the country's love for offal and their grilling tradition. It's typically enjoyed with a side of chimichurri sauce. The Southern loved making use of every part of the pig, and this next one was no exception. I'm talking about chitterlings or chitlins. These are the intestines of the pig, and while they might not be the first thing that comes to mind when you think of barbecue, they've been a beloved part of Southern barbecue culture for generations. Barbecued or smoked chitlins are prepared by thoroughly cleaning and cooking the intestines until they're tender and flavorful. The key to making chitlins enjoyable is all about seasoning and preparation, turning what might seem like an unusual ingredient into a delicious barbecue treat. Now, I'm not saying everyone will love them, but they definitely have a loyal following. But like many traditional foods, chitlins are falling out of favor. It's a sad day for those who appreciate the bold flavors of the South. General Mills introduced Sir Grapefellow and Baron von Redberry, the history books of American cereal, during 1972, and these even had World War I and II packaging. These cereals were incredibly popular, with most U.S. kids waking up across the nation to enjoy them, even though it was torture not getting those last 5 minutes of sleep. Even adults could enjoy a bowl when there was nothing else in the pantry, and you just had to quiet your stomach. These cereals rival all the big names that were already present in the market and wreaking havoc, such as Quake and Frankenberry. And despite being loyal to many of those kids, definitely changed their minds the first time a bowl of this came out. Much to their sadness, in 1975, it got discontinued and has not made any noise since in the market. We're going full-on adventurous eaters now. Barbecued frog legs. Frog legs might seem like an exotic choice for barbecue, but they were once a popular item in some regions. These were the stars of every dinner party in Louisiana. The Louisianians loved seasoning them with Cajun spices, and they were a popular choice at local festivals and seafood boils. The Fellsmere Frog Leg Festival in Florida celebrates the dish every January. They are also eaten in eastern states, but not as commonly. Frog legs are rich in protein, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin A, and potassium. They are often said to taste like chicken because of their mild flavor, with a texture most similar to chicken wings, so they don't taste like whatever you had in mind. Nabisco's Swiss cheese crackers were another popular thing to chow down on while you were hungry or waiting on a proper meal, and they picked up a lot of steam towards the end of the 70s and the beginning of the 80s. These crackers are used in sandwiches, nachos, as a crumb topping, and a lot more. They came in this bright red and yellow box, which, by the way, did you know the color yellow is supposed to trigger your hunger? That is why McDonald's always has it going on. Anyways, the Nabisco crackers came in some other flavors too, but the Swiss cheese one was the one that had most middle-class Americans in a hypnotic trance, and we can definitely see why. If you were a middle-aged person who wanted to spice up their breakfast with a pastry that did more than just pop up or be slightly golden brown, then Donka's toaster pastries were your nirvana, or at least as close as you could get to one within $1. With a tagline that promised authenticity and being the pastry that deserves to be called pastry, while showing off its soft and flaky crust, these toaster pastries were for 7 cents a pack and could set you up as much as you needed before work because everyone had them, and they were delicious. If you found yourself not having the time or appetite for a full breakfast, then this was definitely the way to go. And plus, they went great with a side of jam or cheese. It has been a long while since these were the talk of the town, but no one can forget having this kind of goodness for less than 10 cents. You may not be the biggest fan of main courses and savory, meaty, carb-filled dishes, so let's switch gears and talk about some boomer desserts that, in the time of the 1970s, they just could not go without. Aspics are definitely something that provided that much needed sugar rush to get through the explosive decade that was the 1990s, where it felt like the entire world was changing every Tuesday. Artistically, food-wise, and economically, it was a very volatile time. If there was any sense of calm, it was in dishes like this, which leaned into the convenient and easy nature of most of the recipes that became mainstay trends of the decade. People wanted easy food that didn't break their back to make, and aspics worked both as a personal one-on-one dessert and at a buffet-style gathering. Let's talk about a meat that's making a comeback, but was once considered a novelty: buffalo. Back in the day, smoked buffalo was a rare treat. It was tough, gamey, and had a strong flavor that wasn't for everyone. But as people started to appreciate more adventurous flavors, buffalo made a comeback. While it's still not as popular as beef or pork, it's definitely gaining ground. It was a popular choice for those who wanted to try something a little different and show off their culinary prowess. They're still rare to find, but if you ever come across smoked buffalo on a menu, it's definitely worth giving it a try for a taste of barbecue history. A favorite of not just grannies across the nation, but also George Clooney. Transparent pie raises an eyebrow because you hear the name and get curious, and that is why you come to the dish, but people always stay for the killer flavor. Nobody knows where the first transparent pie really originated from, but it has been popular in the South and Midwest in places like Mason County in northern Kentucky. It used the same ingredients as a water pie, but without the water, resulting in a richer, denser texture. Before you start wondering, no, the pie is not actually transparent. It probably got its name due to the heavy usage of vanilla that gives the pie its iconic essence. Or maybe our grandparents just went too overboard trying to make sure our sweet teeth were catered to. The next 2 items on the list are going to highlight the sheer versatility of cornmeal as opposed to your regular bowl of oatmeal. And when we say versatile, we mean it, because caramel popcorn is one thing, but popcorn shrimp was an idea that took half of America out. It just was not something people did widely back then, having tiny shrimp thoroughly dipped and laced with cornmeal deep fried until they were a shining heavenly golden. At least people did not do it a lot until the 70s, when this became the movie snack to have or a necessity by your table while you were binging reruns of your favorite show. Popcorn shrimp was an absolutely delicious and incredibly easy appetizer that was not only widely available out on the streets, but also something you could whip up in half an hour at home and in bulk. That kind of ease and practical use really sets food apart from the ones that taste good and the ones that could make it into your daily diet, you know? Unfortunately, they could not stay that way for long, as popcorn shrimp is rarely something people go for today. Let's take it up a notch with some fancy pies instead of basic ones, and the cranberry chiffon pie does not disappoint by any means. Like a dish torn right out of a baking simulation game, with cranberry juice, oranges, egg whites, and more, this pie looks just a little better than it tastes. If the taste is a 10 out of 10, then we are dealing with a 10.5 in terms of appearance. Some things just go past your expectations, do they not? This was a pie you could find both in bakeries and in the homes of your family as you would visit, but there was nothing like a fresh chiffon pie right out of Grandma's oven. All right, let's talk about a barbecue ingredient that's more often found in the pot than on the plate: smoked turkey necks. Now, these aren't exactly barbecue stars, but they do deserve a mention. Smoked turkey necks were once a popular ingredient in soups and stews, adding a rich, smoky depth to dishes that made them savory. The process of smoking turkey necks involved slow cooking them over a wood fire, which infused the meat with a smoky flavor while keeping it tender and juicy. Although they might not be the star of modern barbecue menus, smoked turkey necks still hold a special place in the hearts of those who appreciate their unique flavor and versatility. Well, in 1969, Cracker Barrel started making a name for itself in the South for providing comfort food of several different taste palettes. You had your meatloafs, you had fried chicken, you even had biscuits, all in a family-friendly, rustic environment that was oozing charisma and homeliness. It was hard to keep up with them, and it makes sense why Cracker Barrel managed to become such a popular food chain in that decade, as competitive as it was. It became a staple spot for family dinners and weekend plans. Maybe some of you guys have been there too. Try digging your memory. You'll probably find one at Cracker Barrel, and if you do, then definitely share it with us in the comments. Corn dogs are another example of how water and oil may never have found love, but cornmeal and oil are running a happy family of three currently. Hot dogs that were covered in cornmeal batter and then deep fried until they had a hard crust when you initially first bit into it. But once your teeth had sunk in, it was a tender and tasty experience that made every bit of those 25 cents worth it. Corn dogs were one of the most popular street foods in America in the 70s, and people could even go grocery shopping for packaged variants if they wanted to keep some for home. If you did not feel either of those options too much, they were incredibly easy. Probably even more so than popcorn shrimp, to prepare at home, and you just needed a fryer, sausages, and the batter. So sweetbreads might sound like a dessert, but they're actually a type of offal from the thymus or pancreas of the pig. Traditionally, they were braised or sautéed, but some adventurous souls decided to barbecue them. While they're not for everyone, there's no denying their culinary potential. They have a notable place in Texas barbecue culture. In the Lone Star State, barbecued sweetbreads are considered a delicacy and often featured at high-end barbecue joints and gourmet barbecue competitions. They're typically paired with robust, tangy barbecue sauces and served alongside classic sides like coleslaw or pickles. They weren't the healthiest barbecue choice out there, but their taste made them irresistible. Vegetable pie recipes go all the way back to Europe, but this is about America, so let's stick to the Cliff Notes version of our history tour. Sweet potato pie actually got very popular in the southern parts of the USA during the Colonial era, when America was still a colony under the British Empire. Sweet potatoes had always been used by Southern folk in their desserts. Initially, the vegetable was popularized by Black American households that spread their magic across the nation. It gets more interesting, though, as word is they got the idea from Native American cooking practices. Basically, the rabbit hole of who made it first can go deep, but none of that matters when you consider how cost-effective and delicious this pie is. Potatoes in general were becoming the top most consumed vegetable, and to find a way to incorporate it into a dessert for the masses is cooking talent at its finest. What made its way onto the salad bars, the appetizer sections, and the hors d'oeuvres of the boomer era? Stuff like lima beans are a pretty solid palate to start. They used to be featured in this meat and three-style meals which involved meat. That was a tradition that peaked in the 70s, and it basically let a customer pick any one kind of meat and pair it with side dishes, up to 3 at a time, hence the name. It was definitely more of a southern lunch thing. Lima beans were one of those sides that would often get paired with traditional food like casseroles or roast beef, or even pot roasts. It was a great and affordable side to work with, and it worked a little bit of healthy eating into your life too, all while costing just a few cents. Keebler's fudge-flavored Magic Millies were a trick-or-treat item, so you can imagine how the sales spiked for this chocolatey snack during Halloween. Think of these as ice cream sandwich cakes, except a lot more reasonably priced and not at all something you can only have once or twice a week because it just would not work with your monthly schedule money-wise any other way. The lovely thing about a snack, food tradition, or dish that works well within the mass class's capacity during the times is that the product instantly becomes massively accessible. Magic Millies were definitely a prime example of this, as during the height of their fame in the 70s, you could not tear a kid away from these. Extremely popular in states like Oregon was the purple plum pie, which sounds as appetizing as it actually is. People would use branded canned purple plums or homegrown ones and layer black plum slices to give an incredibly deep purple color, along with a very vivid texture. Think of it like a tart cherry pie that you could really sink your teeth into, where the food just seems to melt perfectly in your mouth. In terms of syrup, most people thought to keep it plain and simple with just a good and proper lavender syrup because it really brought out the vanilla extract in the pie. Plum pies were always a big hit in America, but this dish took it a step further and solidified them as one of the many gems of the 1900s. The fact that it literally looks like a gem, if you get a bit creative with the layering, does not help at all. If you've ever been to a large gathering or a festive celebration, you might have encountered the grand spectacle of a whole barbecued hog. Or ask your grandparents about it. They must know about this epic meal. This classic Southern barbecue tradition was especially celebrated in North Carolina, where it originated. The cooking method involved slow roasting a whole pig over an open flame or in a pit, often for up to 24 hours. Now, we're talking epic proportions. This was the ultimate show of hospitality. Neighbors, friends, and family would gather for hours, feasting on the smoked animal. It was not just a dinner party, but a whole bonding experience. But as life got busier and people moved away from extended family gatherings, the whole hog barbecue started to become less common. Let's take a wild turn because this one is a far cry from the classic barbecue menu. But hog maw was a true barbecue favorite in its own right. Now, hog maw, or pig stomach, is exactly what it sounds like: the stomach of a pig, stuffed with a mixture of spices, vegetables, and sometimes meat, then slow cooked or barbecued. This dish has deep roots in Southern barbecue traditions where no part of the pig goes to waste. Now, I'm not going to lie, it sounds challenging. But for those brave souls who dared to try it, it was apparently a culinary adventure. You know what they say, to each their own, so if you're a fan of this meal, I'm not judging. We all love a good chiffon pie cake, and grandmas are known to get pretty busy with them, especially if it is for a special occasion. We are not sure if Halloween comes into that for you, but for many kids in the late 1900s to 2000s, you could not celebrate October's finest activity without pumpkin chiffon pie. Made with a custard filling that used pumpkin and mixed with egg whites beaten to sheer, creamy perfection, gave the pie a fluffy meringue-like texture that really did justice to the chiffon genre of desserts. Plus, the granulated sugar brought out the best within the pumpkin. Grandmas all around had perfected the art of making sure the gelatin mixed as well as it could with the egg whites, and that is what made their pies so incredibly airy and weightless. Okay, we're back to pork, but in a whole new way: pork cracklins. These delicious morsels were made by frying the skin and fat of the pig until they were golden brown and crispy. In America, cracklins were often enjoyed as a snack or served as a topping for various dishes. Now, these haven't completely fallen off the radar, so if you still want to try them, I guess it's time to book a flight. In the Philippines, pork cracklins are known as chicharron, and they're a popular snack and ingredient in many traditional dishes. Chicharron is often enjoyed with a tangy vinegar dipping sauce or used to add crunch and flavor to stews and soups. These Swanson fried chicken TV dinners were literally the best thing you could get on a budget if you wanted to make your movie viewing sessions infinitely better. They barely cost anything, and you had 280-degree seasoned fried chicken cutlets, which came as frozen dinners. All you had to do was cook them, and by cook we mean flip until golden brown. Sounds easy enough, right? So is mashing some potatoes, which people would often make as a side. Add some thyme and rosemary for the ambiance, and you have yourself a gourmet meal under $10. We cannot stress how much of a reliable comfort food these were, and since they never made you tense up about spending unnecessarily, you could eat with a smile on your face. Unfortunately, they got discontinued in the 2000s despite enjoying such a strong market presence. Buttermilk coconut pies were usually 9-inch pie crusts filled with this rich, thick buttermilk custard that had these tropical notes of coconut accompanying it. Most people in the 1900s had this locked down and would regularly make it, passing the recipe on to their kids so that they could make it for their children one day. You cannot teach your grandmother to suck eggs, though, and neither can you teach her how to make a better coconut pie. Whether it was the amount of buttermilk, the flaky but crumbly crust, or the custard filling that lured you into an incredibly peaceful food coma is beyond us. Buttermilk coconut pies had it all, though, and no one knew what the secret was. Was it how they beat the eggs to perfection, or the small window of a few seconds between perfectly golden brown and overdone? Either way, making one of these was like a Tuesday afternoon reflex to many grannies. Feeling the groove of the 60s yet? Tell me what's your favorite dish from the swinging 60s. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that notification button.